For decades, the story of China has been all about this one thing, an economic miracle. The numbers have been staggering. But what if those giant GDP figures are just the surface? Today, we are diving deep into a fascinating analysis that suggests there's a whole other economic engine humming underneath, a system that plays by a completely different set of rules.
And really, it all kicks off with this central puzzle. On the one hand, you've got this incredible story of growth, right? But on the other, you have people stashing away cash like a massive crisis is just around the corner. So why? In an economy that's supposed to be booming, why are people saving so much? Answering that question is what this is all about.
To figure it out, we've got to look at two totally different stories. The one we usually hear focuses on GDP growth and an improving legal system. A classic development story. But the source material we're looking at today presents a completely different angle. It describes a system built for value extraction, where the law is a tool for power. And the real story isn't about how much wealth is being created, but who actually gets to keep it. And this quote from the source really just cuts right to the heart of it all. Everyone works to create value, but the power system takes almost all of it. It's suggesting this huge disconnect between the people creating the wealth and the system that ultimately collects it. Okay, let's unpack how that actually works.
So, what is the real engine of China's growth? Well, let's start by peeling back the first layer of those big GDP numbers.
Just look at this chart for a second. The difference is pretty stark, isn't it? In most developed economies, growth is powered by people buying stuff. Household consumption. But you can see right here that in China, consumer spending is a much, much smaller slice of the economic pie. In fact, the number is less than 40%. Now, to give you some perspective, in the US or Europe, that number's usually well over 60%. This is a massive clue. It tells you that the wealth being generated in the country isn't really ending up in the pockets of regular people to go out and spend.
So, if people aren't the ones doing the bulk of the spending, where is all this growth coming from? Well, the source argues it's being fueled by enormous, state-directed investment in gigantic projects. We're talking building whole cities, high-speed rail, and massive factories.
And that brings up the next big question. If the state is doing all this spending, where is it getting all that money? The analysis points to three main channels, or what it calls pipelines, that are designed to systematically pull wealth from society and concentrate it within the state power system. So here they are, the three big pipelines. First, you've got the profits from gigantic state-owned companies. Second, a very clever and very lucrative finance model built on selling land. And third, all the value that's generated by controlling the rules of the economic game itself. Let's break each of these down.
The first pipeline comes from what are called state-owned enterprises, or SOEs, and the scale here is just immense. These companies are a colossal part of the economy. And according to the source, their profits, we're talking trillions of yuan, aren't paid out to the public as shareholders. Instead, they're funneled directly into funding the state's strategic goals.
All right, the second pipeline. For decades, this one, called land finance, has basically been like a super-powered ATM for local governments. The model itself is pretty simple. They acquire land really cheaply from farmers, rezone it for development, and then sell it for a huge profit to property developers. This has funded an incredible amount of local government spending.
But that ATM is starting to run dry. With the real estate market in a deep crisis, the money coming in from these land sales is absolutely plummeting. And we're not talking about a small dip here. The source describes this as a major structural failure of a core funding mechanism for the whole system.
Now, the third pipeline is a bit more subtle. The source calls it regulatory rents. Think of it as the hidden wealth that's captured through power, by controlling who gets licenses, who gets access to markets, and by selectively enforcing the rules. Now, this is really hard to measure, but the source points to this massive gap in inequality data. See, the Gini coefficient measures inequality, where 0 is perfect equality. Officially, China's number looks pretty moderate, but independent estimates that try to account for this hidden wealth, they suggest the real disparity is actually extreme.
So how do you formalize and maintain a system like this? Well, that takes us to the deepest layer, the rules of the game itself, the role of the law. According to this analysis, the purpose of the legal system is fundamentally reframed. The idea is that its main job isn't to be a neutral referee or to resolve conflicts fairly. Instead, it's there to provide a kind of legal cover, a legitimate coat, as the quote says, for this process of value extraction by the state.
And the analysis points to some very specific examples. Land laws, for instance, are written in a way that makes it really easy for the state to get land on the cheap. Big regulations like antitrust laws are often enforced selectively, somehow always seeming to miss the most powerful state-owned giants. And of course, the whole idea of an independent judiciary is officially secondary to the principle of party leadership.
So what happens? What are the social consequences when you have over 1 billion people working incredibly hard inside a system that's designed to concentrate the rewards at the very top? Well, the source has a name for it: the high-pressure cooker effect.
And this brings us right back to that puzzle we started with. Why are people saving so much money? The analysis argues it's because of a massive crisis of confidence. When people feel that the power over who gets the wealth is completely out of their hands, they do the logical thing. They hoard cash, preparing for a rainy day they feel is almost certainly on its way. And this is where it all connects. That chronically low consumer spending, it's not some random quirk, it's a direct symptom. All those social trends you hear about, like young people lying flat, basically opting out of the rat race, they're presented as totally logical responses to a system where your individual effort doesn't necessarily translate to your individual reward.
So this leaves us with the final, really critical question. There's no denying that this model of extraction has produced absolutely incredible growth for decades. But now, as its key funding pipelines, especially that land sale ATM, begin to sputter and dry up, you have to ask, is this system truly sustainable for the long haul? And that's the thought we'll leave you with.